Given how extensive and comprehensive modern copyright law is, it's safe to say that establishing fair and effective intellectual property laws are pretty important. There's even a specialized agency within the United Nations dedicated solely to the protection of intellectual property throughout the world. So, would you believe me if I told you that there's actually places on Earth that spit in the face of all this? You shouldn't, because even the most notorious offenders have some degree of copyright law. China became a member of the World Intellectual Property Organization in 1980, and they officially adopted the globally accepted standard of copyright law named Universal Copyright Convention in 1992. The Soviet Union adopted the Universal Copyright Convention in 1973, so when they dissolved in 1991, all of their international obligations were transferred to its successor, Russia. Now, of course, just because they have it in writing doesn't mean they'll enforce it. The United States Trade Representative produces a yearly special 301 report, which basically just reports on the status of American intellectual property enforcement across the world. I don't need to explain the contents of the writing to you. There's 9 pages dedicated to China. Other countries mentioned simply get between 1 to 2 pages. The interesting part, however, is what the report doesn't mention. This tiny island to the right of Puerto Rico has a right to disregard intellectual property obligations to the US. Let me make this clear. China and Russia simply poorly enforce copyright laws as bound by the international treaties they have signed. But this island has a right to not even bother enforcing American copyright. How does this tiny island manage to big dick America harder than even China and Russia? It all started in 1995 with a simple idea. What if we watch sports, but also guessed who would win on the internet with money? This has actually been illegal since 1961, as outlined in the Federal Wire Act, which explicitly prohibit online sports betting businesses within the US. That didn't stop Californian Jay Cohen though. Basking in his legal invulnerability, Jay established the World Sports Exchange in Antigua and watched the money pile up. Well, actually, it did stop Jay Cohen, because in 1998, the US started cracking down on these online gambling websites and charged 21 US citizens. In an absolute stroke of genius, Jay decided to return to the US to contest his court case and subsequently got dunked with a 21-month sentence in prison and a $5,000 fine. Antigua wanted revenge though, and entered talks with the US in attempts to free their boy Jay. And they probably didn't want their other online gambling businesses to get demolished as well. Now obviously, if you were the US, you would just tell Antigua to fuck off. So is this the end of the story for our hero Jay? Not just yet. They had one more trick up their sleeve. In 2003, they unleashed their trump card. Cry to Dad. Dad in this context being the World Trade Organization. But wait, with what? Jay delivered himself into the hands of death and was fairly ruled guilty. How can Antigua contest rulings made on American soil? Well, they didn't. Jay was never freed until 2004. Instead, they accused the US of violating free trade treaties. There exist 2 treaties that the world's economy relies on to function. The GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade established 1947, and the GATS, General Agreement on Trade and Services established 1995. In essence, these 2 treaties serve to eliminate trade protectionism and forbid preferential treatment in the trade of goods and services. The key here is that the preferential treatment clause isn't just about how you treat goods coming into your country. It also stipulated that international goods were to be treated as favorably as domestic goods. And this is where Antigua had a chance to build an actual case against the US. In 2003, Antigua appeared before the WTO and argued that because physical American gambling services were still in operation while Antiguan gambling services were banned, this was unfair, and therefore a violation of the GATS. America's response was that gambling specifically done online was uniformly banned for both domestic and international suppliers, and Antigua couldn't think of a good counter to that. Antigua tried to say that because the US lottery utilizes computer systems to operate, that would technically be online gambling. In response, the US laughed, then told Antigua to fuck off and suck a fat one. At this point, Antigua would have lost the case. But there was just one last thing. They had to sort out a small technicality written into the US GATS Schedule of Commitments. Basically, this schedule is just a massive list of things that America agrees to apply the no preferential treatment clause towards. In Entry 10D, they declare that other recreational services are okay, but not sporting services. As you can expect, America now argues that sporting services covers sports betting, and Antigua says, no it doesn't. Well, thankfully, when these schedules were being written up, the United Nations created a CPC, Central Product Classification. This is basically just a document that defines what each entry of the schedule specifically entails. Under CPC 964, it defines the two terms used within Entry 10D. Sporting services include services regarding sports, events, and facilities, and other recreational services comprised of park and beach services and gambling and betting services. Oh shit. America, now on the verge of losing to a dictionary, hastily argued that their schedule wasn't written according to the CPC and they didn't declare as such, so their schedule can't be interpreted according to those definitions. At this point, the WTO basically handed America the L and stated two things. One, that their schedule is written in exactly the same way as the official template, which is interpreted with the CPC, and two, America's schedule includes specific indications for where they have deviated from the template. This obviously implies that the schedule was written intending to be read with the assumption that it follows the CPC except where they say it isn't, not the other way around. They also examined various English dictionary definitions for what sporting means, but that also didn't go in favor of America, and it was a clear victory for Antigua. In the official concluding remarks, the judging panel notes that, quote, the United States may well have inadvertently undertaken specific commitments on gambling and betting services. However, it is not for the panel to second-guess the intentions of the United States at the time the commitment was scheduled. They also said that they have not ruled whether or not America was allowed to domestically regulate gambling. However, because the regulations were interfering directly with their GATS commitments, they ruled in favor of Antigua. Afterwards, the US filed an appeal, but that didn't go in their favor as well. In light of this, the WTO gave the US until April 2006 to amend its regulations to conform with their GATS schedule. The US didn't bother, so in December of 2007, Antigua requested and got authorized to suspend their obligations to American intellectual property. So here's the plan. If you own an island and want to pirate all the movies you want, set up a gambling paradise. Push the case through the WTO and enjoy all the Avengers cam rips you can handle.